I remember the exact moment my mother took her last breath, March 17th, 2019, 3:47 p.m. Room 412 at Seattle General Hospital. The heart monitor beeping slower and slower, 62 beats per minute, then 51, then 38, then 23, then silence. I remember the smell of the hospital that day. Antiseptic and floor cleaner and something else underneath, something organic and final, something that smelled like endings. I remember the texture of her hand in mine, the way her skin felt papery and thin after weeks of illness, the way her fingers went from warm to cool over exactly 14 minutes, as her circulation stopped and her body began the process of becoming something that wasn't her anymore. I remember every word the doctor said when he came in to officially pronounce her. I remember his name tag, Dr. Samuel Okonkwo Wuita, and the slight Nigerian accent in his voice, and the way he paused for 3.7 seconds between saying, "I'm sorry," and "she's gone." I remember my own crying, the exact pitch of my sobs, the way my voice cracked on the word "mom" at 3:52 p.m., the salt taste of tears running into my mouth, the weight of my sister's hand on my shoulder, her fingers pressing with exactly 4.3 pounds of pressure that I somehow registered even through my grief. That was 6 years ago. And I remember it like it happened 30 seconds ago. Not vaguely, not impressionistically. Perfectly. Every detail, every sensation, every moment of pain preserved in crystalline clarity that will never fade, never soften, never become the gentle sepia-toned memory that grief is supposed to become after enough time has passed. I can close my eyes right now and I'm back in that hospital room. I can smell it, feel it, hear the monitor flatline, watch my mother's chest stop rising, experience the exact moment when the person who gave me life stopped having one of her own. I'm there. I'm always there because I can't forget. My name is Rebecca Torres. I'm 34 years old. I'm a high school history teacher at Lincoln High School in Seattle, Washington. I teach students about events that happened decades or centuries ago, helping them understand and remember the past. The irony of my profession is not lost on me, because 7 months ago, something happened that turned my own memory into a prison I can never escape. Before that night, I had a normal memory. Good, actually, better than average. I could remember important dates, historical facts, my students' names, where I put my keys, most of the time. I could also forget things the way humans are supposed to forget things. Painful experiences would fade over time. Embarrassing moments would lose their sharp edges. Heartbreak would gradually soften into something bearable. That's how memory is designed to work. That's the mercy built into human cognition. We forget so we can move forward. We let go so we can keep living. Now I remember everything. Every single moment since the contact 7 months ago. Every conversation I've had, every word anyone has said to me or near me or about me when they thought I couldn't hear. Every emotion I've felt, cataloged and stored and replaying on demand or without demand whenever my brain decides to surface them. Every embarrassment, every rejection, every moment of physical pain, every cruel word, every disappointment, every loss. All of it, preserved perfectly, accessible instantly, inescapable permanently. I remember stubbing my toe on April 3rd at 7:22 a.m. on the corner of my bed frame. I can still feel it. Right now, the sharp crack of impact, the radiating throb that lasted for 4 hours and 17 minutes, the exact shade of purple the bruise turned over the following week. I experienced that pain fresh every time the memory surfaces, which happens approximately 3 times per day for reasons I cannot control. I remember a student named Tyler Brennan calling me boring behind my back on April 19th during lunch period. I was walking past the cafeteria and heard my name and stopped just around the corner where they couldn't see me. Tyler said, "My Mrs. Torres is so boring, I'd rather watch paint dry than sit through another lecture about the Industrial Revolution." His friends laughed. Jake Morrison laughed the loudest. I can hear that laughter right now. The exact pitch, the exact duration, 2.3 seconds of mockery that I will never unhear for the rest of my life. Every day I walk into that classroom and teach Tyler Brennan about history, and I remember those words perfectly, and I have to pretend I don't, because what else can I do? Confront a 16-year-old about something he said 7 months ago that he's probably forgotten? He's forgotten. I never will. I remember the look on my ex-boyfriend Derek's face when he said he couldn't handle this anymore. May 7th, 6:14 p.m. My apartment. We were standing in the kitchen. I had just finished explaining what was happening to me, about the contact, about my memory, about the fact that I now remembered every lie he'd ever told me over our 2-year relationship. His left eye twitched slightly before he said the word over. His voice dropped in pitch by approximately 40 hertz when he said, "I think we need to end this." He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "I still care about you." He said, "You're too much now, Rebecca. You remember too much. You know too much. I can't be with someone who catalogs every mistake I make and stores it forever." And then he left. Walked out of my apartment at 6:23 p.m. I remember the sound of his footsteps. 14 steps to the door. The click of the latch. The thud of the door closing. The sound of his car starting 47 seconds later in the parking lot below my window. The way the engine faded as he drove away and out of my life, because I had become something he couldn't tolerate. A witness who never forgets. A recorder who never stops recording. A woman whose mind had been transformed into something that terrified the man who once said he loved me. Perfect memory sounds like a gift, like a superpower, like something you'd wish for if a genie appeared and offered you enhanced cognitive abilities. I would have wished for it before, when I didn't understand what perfect memory actually means, what it costs, what it takes from you while appearing to give you everything. It's not a gift, it's a curse wrapped in the illusion of capability. It's a torture device installed directly into my brain by beings I didn't invite and can't explain. And I can't turn it off. I can't forget. I can't let go. I can't move on. I can only accumulate experience after experience and memory after memory, pain after pain, all of it stacking up inside my consciousness like an ever-growing weight that I will carry until the day I die. Today I'm going to tell you what happened that night, what they looked like, what they did to my hippocampus and the neural structures that control memory formation and retention, what they said about why this modification was necessary and what purpose it's supposed to serve, and what it's actually like to live with a mind that refuses to release anything, that clings to every moment with desperate permanence, that makes every experience eternal whether you want it to be or not. Subscribe to Alien Contact Diaries and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to share will make you grateful for every memory you've ever forgotten, every painful moment that's faded, every embarrassment that's softened, every heartbreak that's healed, because time did what time is supposed to do and let you let go. I can't do that anymore. And by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly how much of a mercy forgetting really is. The last normal day, October 11th, 2023. That was my last normal day. I remember it perfectly, of course, but I would have remembered it anyway because it was such an ordinary day that the extraordinary nature of what followed makes it stand out in contrast. I woke up at 6:15 a.m. to the sound of my alarm, the default iPhone tone that I'd never bothered to change because it worked, and I'm not someone who needs personalized ringtones to feel special. I hit snooze once, which I always did, and lay in bed for 9 more minutes thinking about the day ahead. First period was American History, juniors, and we were covering the Great Depression. I had a PowerPoint presentation about the Dust Bowl that I was actually excited to share because I'd found some incredible primary source photographs from the Library of Congress archives. Second period was World History, sophomores, the fall of the Roman Empire, always a challenging topic to make relevant to 16-year-olds who thought anything before the invention of TikTok was ancient history in the boring sense rather than the fascinating sense. Third period was my planning period. Fourth period was American History, again, a different section of juniors. Lunch. Then fifth period, AP History for the advanced students who actually wanted to be there. Sixth period was study hall supervision, which I didn't mind because it gave me time to grade papers while occasionally telling students to stop talking. A completely normal day, the kind of day that should blur into all the other normal days and eventually become part of the general texture of life rather than a distinct memory. But I remember it every minute, every interaction, every thought I had about my lesson plans and my students and my life and my future. I remember eating breakfast, Greek yogurt with granola and blueberries, standing at my kitchen counter while scrolling through the news on my phone. The yogurt was slightly too cold because I'd moved it to the back of the refrigerator where it was colder, and I hadn't thought about it when I grabbed it that morning. I remember the specific headlines I read. A story about a congressional hearing, something about a celebrity divorce, a local piece about traffic delays on I-5 due to construction. None of it mattered. All of it is preserved forever in my brain. I drove to school listening to NPR, a story about inflation and its impact on grocery prices. I parked in my usual spot, third row from the entrance, 7 spaces from the left. I walked into the building at 7:32 a.m. and said good morning to Janet Holloway, the front office administrator, who was wearing a blue cardigan and looked tired because her daughter was sick and she'd been up most of the night. I know this because she told me when I asked how she was doing, and I remember every word of that conversation that lasted approximately 90 seconds and contained absolutely nothing important except the ordinary kindness of colleagues checking in on each other. My classes went well that day. The Dust Bowl presentation was a hit. I showed the photograph of the farmer and his sons walking into a dust storm, their small figures silhouetted against that massive wall of black clouds, and I saw several students actually react with genuine interest rather than the glazed expressions I sometimes get when discussing events that happened 90 years before they were born. Tyler Brennan, the same student who would later call me boring, actually raised his hand and asked a thoughtful question about whether something like the Dust Bowl could happen again with climate change. I remember feeling hopeful about him in that moment. I remember thinking he was one of the bright ones who just needed engagement to shine. I remember both things simultaneously. His intelligent question from October and his cruel mockery from April. Both preserved perfectly. Both part of who Tyler Brennan is in my memory forever. After school, I stayed for an hour grading papers. I drove home. I stopped at the grocery store and bought ingredients for pasta primavera because I was trying to eat more vegetables. I remember every item I put in my cart. I remember the cashier's name was Miguel, and he had a small scar above his left eyebrow, and he told me to have a nice evening when I left. I went home. I cooked dinner. I ate while watching a documentary about ancient Egypt that I'd been meaning to finish. I took a shower. I read for an hour a novel about a woman traveling through Italy that I was enjoying but would never finish because everything changed before I could. I went to bed at 10:30 p.m. I set my alarm for 6:15 a.m. I fell asleep within 20 minutes. Normal. Completely normal. The last normal night of my life. The night everything changed. I woke up at 2:47 a.m. Not gradually. Instantly. One moment I was asleep, dreaming about something I can't remember because it was before my memory changed. And the next moment I was completely awake with my heart already racing and my body already flooded with adrenaline before my conscious mind understood why. My bedroom was filled with light. Not the orange glow of streetlights through my curtains. Not the white flash of car headlights passing by. This was different. Blue light. Pure, saturated blue. The color of the sky at the exact moment between day and night. The color of electricity. The color of something that didn't come from any source I could identify in my normal human experience. The light was everywhere and nowhere. It filled the room uniformly, casting no shadows, coming from no direction, just present, just illuminating everything in that impossible blue that made my familiar bedroom look like an alien landscape. And I couldn't move. Complete paralysis. Every muscle in my body locked in place. I tried to turn my head, couldn't. Tried to lift my arms, couldn't. Tried to call out, to scream, to make any sound at all. My throat was paralyzed too. I couldn't even close my eyes, just frozen, staring straight up at my ceiling, breathing but unable to control anything else, a prisoner in my own body. That's when I saw them. 3 figures entering my field of vision from somewhere beyond my peripheral perception. They moved into view from the right side of my bed, gliding rather than walking, their movements fluid and continuous in a way that human locomotion never is. I couldn't turn my head to look at them directly, but I could see them clearly enough in my frozen forward gaze as they positioned themselves around my bed. One at the foot, one on my left side, one on my right, closest to me, close enough that I could see details I wish I could forget but never will. They were approximately 5 feet tall, thin, extremely thin, with limbs that seemed too long for their torsos and joints that bent at angles that looked wrong. Their skin was gray, a medium gray, like wet cement. Smooth and hairless and somehow matte, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Their heads were large in proportion to their bodies, rounded with slight indentations where a human would have temples. No visible ears, no hair, just smooth gray skin stretched over skulls that were bigger than human skulls should be. And their eyes were enormous, taking up perhaps a third of their facial surface area. Solid black, no white, no visible iris or pupil, just deep, reflective black that looked like polished obsidian or dark mirrors that showed nothing behind them. When the one closest to me leaned down toward my face, I could see my own frozen reflection in those black eyes. A small, terrified human trapped in her own body, unable to run or fight or even look away. I wanted to scream. I have never wanted anything more than I wanted to scream in that moment. To release some of the terror that was flooding my nervous system, to call for help, even though some part of me knew no help would come, to do something rather than just lie there paralyzed while impossible beings stood over me like surgeons preparing for an operation. But I couldn't make a sound, couldn't move a muscle, could only watch and feel and experience every second of what was about to happen, with the full awareness that I was completely powerless to stop it. The one on my right extended a hand toward my head. I saw it coming in slow motion, or what felt like slow motion, every detail registering with hyper-clarity that I now recognize as the beginning of my memory modification. The hand had 4 fingers, long, thin, with one more joint than human fingers have, allowing them to curve in ways that human fingers can't. No fingernails that I could see, just smooth gray skin ending in slightly rounded tips that looked almost soft, almost gentle, as they reached toward my temple. The touch was cool, not cold, but noticeably cooler than human body temperature. The 4 fingers pressed against my left temple with delicate precision, and I felt something. Not pain, something else. A sensation of intrusion, of access, of something entering my brain through a door I didn't know existed. It felt like a key sliding into a lock I didn't know I had, like a password being entered into a system I didn't know I was running, and then everything went white. What they did to my brain, the white wasn't light. It wasn't the absence of vision. It was something else, a state of pure perception, where I was aware, but not in any way I had words for. I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I wasn't anywhere that existed in physical space as I understood it. I was in a place made of information, of memory, of the raw material of consciousness itself, and I could feel them in there with me. Not see them. Feel them. Their presence in my mind was like a sound you sense rather than hear, like the pressure change before a storm, like knowing someone is watching you even though you can't see them. They were examining me. Not my body, my mind. Going through my memories, like someone sorting through files in a cabinet, pulling out experiences and looking at them and putting them back, accessing everything I'd ever thought or felt or done. The violation was absolute and intimate in ways that physical violation can't match. They were inside myself, reading my identity, learning who I was by experiencing what I'd experienced. I don't know how long this lasted. Time didn't work normally in that white space. It could have been seconds or hours or something outside of time altogether. But at some point, the examination shifted into something else. Modification. I felt them changing something in the way my brain processed and stored information. It wasn't painful, but it was profound. Like feeling a bone being reset. But the bone was a fundamental structure of my cognition. They were rewiring my hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory formation and consolidation. They were adjusting my neural pathways, the connections that determine what gets remembered and what gets forgotten. They were removing the deletion protocols, the mercy circuits, the built-in capacitor for human memory to soften and fade and eventually release what no longer serves us. And while they did it, I heard them, not with my ears, with my mind. Their communication was direct, thought to thought, concept to concept, bypassing language entirely in favor of pure meaning that I've had to translate into words afterward. The message went something like this: we are enhancing your memory capacity to total retention. You will remember everything from this point forward, every experience, every sensation, every piece of information that enters your consciousness will be stored permanently and accessibly. This modification is necessary. Your species is approaching a threshold of collective memory that will determine your survival or extinction. You are being equipped to witness and record what is coming. The faithful memory of those who experience the transition will be essential to those who come after. You are being made into a keeper of the record. That was it. No explanation of who they were or where they came from. No justification for why they had chosen me. No warning about what this modification would cost me psychologically. No acknowledgement that they were fundamentally altering my brain without my consent. Just a statement of purpose delivered with the certainty of beings who either didn't understand or didn't care that they were changing my life forever. And then the white faded, the blue light returned. My bedroom materialized around me. The figures were gone, and I could move again. I sat up in bed, gasping, my body shaking so violently that my teeth chattered. I looked around my room, searching for any evidence that what had just happened was real. Everything looked normal. My curtains were closed. My phone was on my nightstand, showing 3:22 a.m., which meant approximately 35 minutes had passed since I'd woken to the blue light, though it had felt both shorter and longer than that. I got out of bed on shaking legs and turned on every light in my apartment, walked through every room, checked every closet, every corner, every potential hiding place. There was nothing. No beings. No blue light. No evidence whatsoever except the pounding of my heart and the sweat soaking my pajamas and the absolute certainty that something real had happened to me. Something that I would never be able to prove. Something that would make me sound insane if I tried to describe it. But I knew in my bones, in my cells, in whatever part of me still felt like me, that I had been visited, examined, modified, changed in ways that I wouldn't fully understand until the morning, when I woke up and discovered that I could remember my dreams from the night before in perfect detail, and the conversation that I'd had with Janet Holloway the previous morning, and the exact wording of every headline I'd read at breakfast, and the specific sequence of NPR stories I'd listened to in the car, and everything else from the day before and the day before that and every day since, with a clarity and precision that normal human memory never achieves. They had done exactly what they said they would do. They had made me remember everything. And 7 months later, I'm still living with the consequences of their gift that feels like a curse. Still accumulating memories that will never fade. Still carrying every moment of pain and joy and mundane experience with equal weight and permanence. Still becoming more and more burdened by the ever-growing archive of my own life that I can never delete, never soften, never release. The first weeks of remembering, the first few days after the contact, I didn't fully understand what had happened to me. I noticed that my recall was sharper than usual, but I attributed it to the stress of the experience, to hypervigilance, to my brain being on high alert after what felt like a trauma. I went to work, taught my classes, tried to pretend everything was normal. But by day 4, I started realizing that I wasn't forgetting things I should have been forgetting. A conversation with a colleague in the teacher's lounge about her weekend plans. I could recall it word for word. A student's offhand comment about the homework assignment. Still there, still perfect. The exact sequence of songs that played on the radio during my commute. All of it preserved. None of it fading, everything as clear and accessible as if it had just happened. By day 7, I started testing myself deliberately. I memorized a random 20-digit number and checked it again at the end of the day. Perfect recall. I read a page from a book I'd never seen before and recited it back to myself an hour later, word for word. I listened to a podcast and then wrote down the entire transcript from memory. Accurate to approximately 99%. with the only errors being proper nouns I hadn't heard before and wasn't sure how to spell. My memory had fundamentally changed, not improved in a gradual sense, transformed into something categorically different from normal human memory. I should have been thrilled. Perfect memory is every student's fantasy, every professional's dream, every human being's wish when they're trying to remember where they put their keys or what they were supposed to buy at the grocery store. For the first 2 weeks, I tried to embrace it. I stopped taking notes in meetings because I didn't need them. I threw away my lesson plan binder because every lesson I'd ever taught was now permanently accessible in my brain. I started memorizing poetry, long poems I'd always wanted to know by heart, and found that I could internalize a sonnet in a single reading and retain it perfectly forever. It felt like a superpower, like I'd been upgraded, like I was becoming a better, more capable version of myself. The shift happened in week 3, when I started noticing that I wasn't just remembering facts and information. I was remembering everything, every moment, every sensation, every emotion. And unlike facts, which are neutral, emotions accumulate. Negative emotions, especially, they pile up and up and up. And when they never fade, when every rejection and embarrassment and moment of pain stays perfectly preserved in your consciousness forever, the weight becomes unbearable. Week 3 was when I had my first breakdown. I was in my classroom during my planning period, grading papers, when suddenly I was overwhelmed by a cascade of memories that I didn't summon and couldn't control. Every criticism a student had ever made about me, every time a parent had complained, every mistake I'd made in my teaching career, every moment when I'd felt inadequate or unprepared or not good enough. All of it hitting me simultaneously, as fresh and painful as the moments when they'd first occurred. I started crying at my desk, couldn't stop. The school counselor found me 40 minutes later, still crying, still trapped in the loop of negative memories that kept surfacing and refusing to go back wherever memories are supposed to go when you're done experiencing them. She asked if I wanted to talk about it. I tried to explain, said something about my memory being different now, about not being able to forget things, about feeling overwhelmed by the accumulation of every bad thing that had ever happened to me. She nodded sympathetically and recommended that I see a therapist. She probably thought I was having a stress-related episode. Burnout, anxiety, something with a name and a treatment and a recovery timeline. She didn't understand, and I didn't know how to make her understand, that my brain had been literally rewired by beings from somewhere else, and that no amount of therapy was going to fix what wasn't technically broken. My memory worked perfectly now. That was the problem. What perfect memory really means, let me explain what perfect memory actually means in practice, because I don't think most people understand the reality of it. People imagine perfect memory as a library, a vast organized collection of information that you can access when you want it, browse when you're curious, close, and walk away from when you're done. That's not what it is. Perfect memory is more like an ocean. You're swimming in it constantly, surrounded by it on all sides, and waves come at you whether you want them to or not. You can dive into specific memories when you choose, yes, but memories also surface on their own, triggered by associations you can't control, rising up from the depths and demanding your attention, regardless of whether you summoned them. I'll be teaching a lesson about World War and suddenly I'm remembering every conversation I've ever had about war, every documentary I've ever watched, every student's question and comment and facial expression from years of covering this material. The relevant memories are helpful. The irrelevant ones are distracting. And I can't always tell which is which, because they all arrive with equal clarity and demand equal attention. I'll be eating lunch in the teacher's lounge, and the taste of the cafeteria food will trigger memories of every meal I've eaten in that room for the past 4 years, simultaneously, overlapping, some pleasant, some neutral, some containing conversations that were hurtful or awkward or uncomfortable. All of it surfacing together because the trigger activated all associated memories rather than the one I needed. And then there's the pain, physical and emotional. Every stubbed toe, every headache, every moment of nausea or discomfort, preserved perfectly and retrievable in full sensory detail. I had food poisoning in March. One night of illness, vomiting and cramping and feeling like I was dying. For a normal person, that memory would fade into a vague recollection of being sick. Not pleasant, but not viscerally present. For me, I can access that night in complete detail anytime I think about it or anytime my brain decides to think about it for me. I can feel the nausea, the cramping, the cold bathroom floor against my cheek when I collapsed between episodes. I can relive food poisoning as if it's happening right now, and the emotional pain is worse. Every heartbreak, every rejection, every funeral I've attended, every time someone I trusted let me down, every moment of shame, every embarrassing mistake, every social failure, every time I said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing or was the wrong thing in someone's eyes. All of it, fresh, vivid, eternally present. My mother's death, which I described at the beginning, plays on repeat in my mind approximately twice a day. Not because I choose to remember it, because something triggers it, a smell or a word or a thought about mortality, and suddenly I'm back in that hospital room watching her die, feeling her hand go cold, hearing the monitor flatline, experiencing grief as if it's brand new. Because for my brain, every access of that memory is a new experience rather than a faded recollection. Grief is supposed to soften over time. That's what everyone says. Time heals all wounds. The pain fades. You learn to carry it. You move on, but I can't move on because I can't fade. My grief for my mother is exactly as sharp today as it was 6 years ago when she died. My heartbreak over Derek leaving is exactly as painful as it was when he walked out the door. Every loss, every disappointment, every wound, preserved in amber, never healing, never scarring over, never becoming the manageable ache that humans are supposed to eventually feel, instead of the acute agony of fresh loss. I am perpetually wounded, every wound I've ever received still bleeding, every pain still fresh, every moment of suffering still happening right now in the eternal present of my perfect memory. The relationship that couldn't survive. Derek and I had been together for 2 years when the contact happened. We met at a friend's birthday party in October 2021. He was tall, funny, worked as a software engineer for a company that made apps I didn't fully understand, but pretended to find interesting when he talked about them. He had kind eyes and a laugh that made me feel warm and a way of listening that made me feel heard. We moved in together after 18 months of dating. We talked about marriage sometimes, in that vague future tense that couples use when they're serious but not quite ready. I thought he was the person I would spend my life with. I thought we had something solid and real and lasting. And maybe we did, before I became someone who remembers everything. The problems started small. About 3 weeks after the contact, I noticed that I could recall the conversations Derek had forgotten, not important ones. Just ordinary exchanges that couples have and then move past. He would say something like, I don't think we ever talked about going to that restaurant, and I would remember exactly when we had talked about it. November 14th, 2022, 8:37 p.m. We were watching television, and a commercial came on for the restaurant, and he said it looked good. And I said we should try it sometime, and he said maybe for my birthday. And then we forgot about it, because that's what normal people do with minor conversations that don't matter. But I didn't forget. I couldn't forget. So when he said we'd never discussed it, I corrected him, told him the exact date and time and what we'd both said. He laughed it off the first time, called me his human recorder, said it was impressive. But by the fourth or fifth time, I corrected his memory with perfect accuracy. The laughter stopped. He started looking at me differently, with wariness, with the expression of someone who realizes they're being watched more closely than they're comfortable with. And then I started noticing his lies. Not big lies, not infidelity or financial deception or anything that would justify ending a relationship on its own. Small lies, the kind that everyone tells and everyone forgets. He said he was working late on February 8th. I remembered the sound of a bar in the background when he called to say goodnight. He said he'd never met my colleague Sandra at a party. I remembered them talking for 7 minutes in the kitchen at the holiday gathering in December. A conversation that included Sandra touching his arm twice and him laughing at something she said that I couldn't hear from across the room. He said he'd ordered my birthday present online. I remembered the distinctive crinkle of a Nordstrom shopping bag in his car 3 days before my birthday, which meant he'd lied about where he bought it. And I couldn't figure out why anyone would lie about something so trivial. The lies accumulated in my memory like evidence in a case I didn't want to prosecute. Each one small, each one forgivable. But together they formed a pattern of casual dishonesty that I could never unsee, because I could never... Unforgettable. I started questioning everything he said. Not out loud at first, just internally, checking his statements against my perfect record of our shared history, finding discrepancies, small inconsistencies, moments where his version of events didn't match what I remembered happening, and I remembered everything happening exactly as it happened, so the discrepancies were always his, never mine. By month 3 after the contact, our relationship had become a minefield of unspoken accusations. I knew things I couldn't unknow. I remembered things he'd forgotten he'd said. I could cite exact quotes from arguments we'd had months ago, words he'd used in anger that he no longer remembered, but that I experienced fresh every time they surfaced in my consciousness. He said I was keeping score. He said I was weaponizing my memory. He said it wasn't fair that I could recall every mistake he'd ever made, while he could only remember the general shape of our conflicts. He was right. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. I didn't ask for perfect memory. I didn't want to remember every careless word he'd ever spoken. But I did remember, and I couldn't pretend I didn't. And the weight of accumulated grievances that should have faded but never did was crushing our relationship under its mass. The final conversation happened on May 7th. I had decided to tell him everything about the contact, about the beings, about what they had done to my brain. I thought maybe if he understood that this wasn't my choice, that I was suffering from this too, that I would give anything to be able to forget the way normal people forget. Maybe he would have compassion instead of resentment. Maybe we could work through this together. I sat him down in the kitchen of our apartment. I told him about the blue light, the paralysis, the figures, the modification of my hippocampus, the message about being made into a keeper of records. I told him everything, holding nothing back, trusting him with the strangest and most vulnerable truth I had ever shared with anyone. He listened, didn't interrupt. His face went through a series of expressions that I catalogued automatically: shock and confusion and skepticism and something that looked like fear. When I finished, there was a long silence, 14 seconds of silence that felt much longer. And then he said, "Rebecca, I think you need help, professional help. This can't be real. You're having some kind of breakdown." I knew he wouldn't believe me. I had prepared for that possibility. So I recited back to him the exact conversation he'd had with his mother on March 23rd, when he called me too intense and said he was thinking about ending things word for word, including his mother's response, including the pause where he'd sighed before saying, "But I do love her, I think." I had been in the next room, supposedly asleep, but my enhanced memory had captured his voice through the thin walls with perfect clarity. His face went pale, white, actually, like blood had drained from his skin in real time. He asked how I knew that. I told him I remembered everything now, including things I shouldn't have been able to hear, including whispers from across rooms, including conversations that happened while I was supposedly not paying attention. I remember everything, Derek. Every lie, every conversation about me when you thought I couldn't hear, every moment of our relationship preserved in perfect detail. I can't forget any of it. I can't forgive any of it either, because forgiveness requires letting go, and I can't let go anymore. He stood up from the table. His chair scraped against the floor with a sound that lasted exactly 1.3 seconds. He said, "I can't do this. I can't be with someone who remembers everything. I can't be watched like that. I can't have every mistake I make stored forever. I can't live under that kind of surveillance. You're not the person I fell in love with anymore. You're something else now. Something I don't understand and don't want to understand. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I'm done." He walked out at 6:23 p.m., 14 steps to the door, click of the latch, thud of the door closing, 47 seconds until his car started, and then gone. Out of my life. Leaving me alone, with my perfect memory of every moment we'd shared, every kiss, every laugh, every promise he'd made and broken, every word of love that had apparently reached its limit when I became someone who could never forget, teaching with a mind that won't release. Returning to work after Derek left was one of the hardest things I've ever done, not because of the heartbreak, though that was devastating, but because teaching requires a kind of selective memory that I no longer possessed. Teaching requires remembering what's relevant and forgetting what isn't. Remembering lesson plans and curriculum objectives and students' names while forgetting the 1,000 small irritations and disappointments that fill every school day. Before the contact, I was good at this. I could have a frustrating interaction with a student in the morning and move past it by afternoon, not holding grudges, not carrying resentment, treating each class period as a fresh start. Now I remember every frustrating interaction I've ever had, every student who rolled their eyes at my lesson, every parent who questioned my competence, every administrator who criticized my methods, every moment of disrespect or dismissal or disappointment, preserved perfectly, surfacing constantly, making it nearly impossible to approach my work with the fresh optimism that good teaching requires. Tyler Brennan, the student who called me boring, sits in my third row every day. I teach him American history. I help him understand the Great Depression and World War II and the Civil Rights Movement and all the other topics that shape our national identity. And every single day I remember his voice saying, "Mrs. Torres is so boring, I'd rather watch paint dry." I remember his friends laughing. I remember the way my stomach dropped when I heard it. I remember standing frozen around that corner, wondering if I should confront him, deciding not to, walking to my classroom with the words echoing in my head. And now they echo forever. Every time I see Tyler's face, I hear those words. I can't unsee them, can't unhear them, can't approach him without that memory coloring my perception. I try to be fair. I try to grade his work objectively. I try not to let my perfect memory of his cruelty affect my teaching. But how can I be truly unbiased when I remember every negative thing he's ever done, while a normal teacher would have forgotten most of it by now? How can I offer him the clean slate that students deserve when my brain won't allow any slate to ever be cleaned? It's not just Tyler, it's everyone. Every student I've taught for the past 7 months is cataloged in my brain with complete records of every interaction. The ones who tried hard, the ones who didn't, the ones who were kind, the ones who were cruel, the ones who cheated on tests. Yes, I remember exactly who copied from whom on which day, and the ones who earned every grade. Honestly, I know too much about all of them. I remember too much. And that knowledge, that inescapable, comprehensive knowledge, makes it impossible to maintain the professional distance that teachers need. I know which students have difficult home lives because I remember every offhand comment they've ever made about their families. I know which students are struggling with mental health because I remember the days they came in with red eyes or missed class for therapy appointments they thought were private. I know which students have crushes on which other students because I remember the glances and the notes and the whispered conversations that normal teachers might notice once and then forget. I remember everything, every secret accidentally revealed, every vulnerability exposed, every private moment that became public in my perception, even when it wasn't meant to be. By month 4, after the contact, I started having trouble managing my classroom. Not because my teaching skills had declined, but because my reactions had become unpredictable. A student would make a minor complaint about an assignment, and suddenly I'd be flooded with memories of every complaint every student had ever made, feeling the cumulative frustration of years of small grievances all at once. A parent would email questioning a grade, and I'd remember every parent email I'd ever received, the supportive ones and the hostile ones, the reasonable ones and the ones that accused me of incompetence or bias or not caring enough about their special child. The weight of accumulated professional interactions was crushing me the same way the weight of personal memories was crushing me. Everything was too much. Every day added more. Nothing ever faded. I requested a meeting with my principal in May, told her I was struggling with some personal issues and might need accommodations. I didn't tell her about the contact or the beings or the memory modification, obviously. Just said I was having difficulty with stress and emotional regulation. She was sympathetic but also clearly concerned. Said she'd noticed changes in my demeanor. Said other teachers had mentioned that I seemed different. Said several students had reported that I sometimes stared at them with an intensity that made them uncomfortable, which I realized was me accessing memories about them without realizing my focus was visible on my face. She recommended I take some personal days, see a doctor, talk to someone about whatever I was going through. I agreed, took a week off, used the time to research what was happening to my brain and whether anyone else in the world was experiencing anything similar. The medical investigation. The first doctor I saw was my regular physician, Dr. Amanda Chen. I told her I was experiencing memory changes, enhanced recall, inability to forget. She listened carefully, ordered some basic blood work, and referred me to a neurologist. I didn't mention the beings or the blue light or any of the impossible parts of my experience. I just described the symptoms, perfect memory, sensory details preserved indefinitely, emotions attached to memories remaining fresh instead of fading. The neurologist, Dr. Robert Okafor, was intrigued. He said what I was describing sounded like hyperthymesia, a rare condition where people remember their lives in extraordinary detail. There are only about 60 documented cases worldwide. But when he tested me, my performance exceeded anything he'd seen in hyperthymesia patients. I didn't just remember autobiographical details. I remembered everything, conversations verbatim, visual scenes in photographic detail, physical sensations preserved as if they were still occurring. He ordered an MRI of my brain, specifically focusing on my hippocampus and the neural structures involved in memory formation. The results confused him. He said my hippocampus showed unusual activity patterns, constant theta wave generation during what should be memory consolidation phases. Instead of the normal process of encoding, consolidating, and selectively pruning memories, my brain appeared to be encoding everything with equal priority and never pruning anything. He used the phrase zero deletion protocol to describe what he was seeing. A brain that stores but never discards. A memory system that accumulates indefinitely without the normal forgetting. Functions that keep human cognition manageable. He referred me to a research team at the University of Washington that studied unusual memory conditions. They tested me extensively over 3 weeks. Cognitive assessments, memory challenges, brain imaging during recall tasks, psychological evaluations. By the end, they had documented what they called an unprecedented case of total memory retention with no apparent cause, no brain injury, no genetic markers associated with hyperthymesia, no explanation for why my memory had suddenly transformed into something categorically different from normal human cognition. The lead researcher, Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, asked if anything unusual had happened around the time my memory changed. I almost told her, almost described the contact. But I stopped myself because I knew how it would sound. I knew she would attribute my memory changes to psychological trauma and delusion rather than taking seriously the idea that non-human beings had modified my brain. So I said no. Nothing unusual, just woke up one day and my memory was different. She didn't believe me. I could see the skepticism in her expression. But she couldn't prove I was lying, and the data was undeniable. My memory had fundamentally changed. Whatever the cause, the effect was real. The research team wanted to study me long-term, publish papers, present at conferences, turn my condition into a case study that would advance our understanding of memory and cognition. I agreed to participate because I hoped they might find something that could help me. Some intervention that could restore my ability to forget. Some treatment that could soften the edges of my accumulated memories and give me back the mercy of normal human forgetting. But 6 months of research produced no solutions, no treatment, no hope. Dr. Yamamoto told me that they didn't even fully understand how my brain was managing the information load I was carrying. By their calculations, the amount of sensory and experiential data I had accumulated in 7 months should have overwhelmed my neural capacity, or I should be experiencing severe cognitive dysfunction, memory interference, retrieval failures, something. Instead, I was functioning normally except for the psychological burden of remembering too much. She said something was compensating. Something was allowing my brain to handle impossible amounts of data. And they didn't know what that something was. I knew. The beings who modified me had done more than just remove my deletion protocols. They'd upgraded my storage capacity, expanded my neural networks, made me capable of holding information that normal human brains couldn't contain. They'd made me into something more than human in one very specific way. And I was the only one who knew the truth about where that enhancement had come from. Finding others who remember, it was Dr. Yamamoto who first mentioned the experiencer network. She said it carefully, almost reluctantly, as if she was afraid of what she was about to suggest. She told me that in her research into unusual cognitive phenomena, she had encountered reports of people who attributed their experiences to non-human contact. She wasn't endorsing the idea, she emphasized, just acknowledging that there were communities online where people with unexplainable experiences found support from others who believed them. She thought I might benefit from connecting with people who had been through something similar, whatever that something actually was. I went home that night and searched, found forums, websites, support groups, communities of people who called themselves experiencers and shared stories of contact, abduction, modification, things that mainstream medicine and psychology couldn't explain. And within those communities, I found others who remembered. Not exactly like me. Their modifications were different. Some saw things, some heard things, some had physical changes. But a precious few, had experienced memory modifications that resembled what had happened to me. I found Marcus first, a 47-year-old accountant from Denver who woke up one morning 3 years ago with perfect recall of everything since his contact experience. He'd lost his marriage, his job, his entire social circle, because no one could tolerate being around someone who remembered every mistake they'd ever made. He lived alone now, worked from home as a freelance bookkeeper, said the isolation was better than the alternative of constantly confronting people with memories they'd rather forget. He told me it never gets easier. You just learn to manage it. Learn to keep quiet about what you remember. Learn to pretend you've forgotten things you'll never forget. It's exhausting, but it's survivable. I found Diana next, a 39-year-old former attorney from Boston whose memory modification had been so severe that she'd had to leave her profession entirely. She said law requires selective memory, the ability to focus on relevant facts and ignore irrelevant ones, and she could no longer do that. Every case she'd ever worked on was present in her mind simultaneously. Every client, every argument, every judge's ruling, the accumulation had become so overwhelming that she'd had a breakdown in court and been hospitalized for 2 weeks. Now she worked as a librarian, said the quiet helped, said being surrounded by books containing other people's memories was easier than being trapped inside her own. And I found 7 of us in total, 7 people scattered across the country who had experienced contact and memory modification that removed their ability to forget. We formed a private group, checked in weekly, shared strategies for surviving with minds that never released anything. Marcus suggested mental categorization, consciously filing memories into accessible but not intrusive storage, though he admitted it only partially worked. Diana recommended physical exercise, said that exhausting her body gave her brain something else to focus on, besides endless memory retrieval. A woman named Sunita suggested meditation, specifically a technique of acknowledging memories as they surfaced and then consciously releasing attention from them, not forgetting, but also not engaging. None of these techniques restored normal forgetting. Nothing could do that, but they made the weight slightly more bearable. They gave me tools for managing the unmanageable, and most importantly, they gave me community. People who believed me, people who understood, people who didn't think I was crazy or lying or seeking attention when I described the beings who had modified my brain without my consent, the message they wanted me to carry. It wasn't until month 5 that I started understanding why they had done this to me. The memory modification hadn't just preserved my personal experiences, it had preserved something else. Information I didn't consciously remember receiving, but that existed in my memory nonetheless. Images, data, knowledge that surfaced gradually like photographs, developing in chemical solution, becoming clearer over time until I could see what had been hidden in my own mind. During the contact, while they were modifying my hippocampus, they had also implanted information, a message, a warning, something they wanted me to carry and eventually share. The information came in fragments at first, visions of environmental data, climate graphs showing exponential warming curves, ecosystem collapse cascading across interconnected systems, ocean acidification reaching tipping points, species extinction accelerating beyond natural recovery rates. I didn't know where this information came from. It wasn't from news I'd watched or articles I'd read. It was from them, implanted alongside the memory modification, given to me because they wanted me to remember it, wanted me to share it. The core message crystallized around month 6. I could finally articulate what they had communicated during those moments in the white space when they were modifying my brain. Your species is approaching an environmental threshold. Within the next 10 to 15 years, you will reach points of no return in multiple interconnected systems. Climate, biodiversity, ocean health, atmospheric composition. Once these thresholds are crossed, the cascading effects cannot be reversed on any timeline relevant to human civilization. We have observed this pattern on other worlds. Some species respond to the warning in time, others do not. Those who do not respond become extinct or regress to primitive survival states. We are making witnesses, humans who will remember everything, who will carry the record of what is coming, who will preserve the truth even when others choose to forget it. You are part of this project. Your memory has been modified so that you cannot look away, cannot deny, cannot forget what you have been shown. You will witness the threshold. You will remember it accurately. You will carry that memory forward for those who come after, if there are any who come after. That was the purpose. That was why they had turned my memory into a permanent archive, not as a gift, not as an upgrade, as a burden, a responsibility, a mission I hadn't volunteered for but couldn't escape. They had made me into a keeper of records because they believed humanity was approaching a crisis that most people would prefer to forget. They had given me perfect memory so that I couldn't participate in the collective denial that allows species to walk toward extinction with their eyes closed. I was meant to remember, to witness, to preserve the truth, and to share it when the time came with anyone who was willing to listen. Whether that made me a prophet or a prisoner, I still haven't decided. What I know is that I can't forget what they showed me. The data, the projections, the warnings, it's all there, preserved perfectly in my modified memory, alongside every other moment of my life since the contact. Every painful experience, every lost relationship, every moment of suffering, that normal forgetting would have softened by now. All of it together, my personal archive and their planetary warning, carried in a mind that was never designed for this weight, but that has been modified to bear it anyway. What I want you to understand, 7 months of perfect memory has taught me something that I never would have understood otherwise. Forgetting is not a flaw. It is not a weakness. It is not a failure of human cognition. Forgetting is mercy. Forgetting is what allows us to heal from loss, to move past rejection, to survive heartbreak and disappointment and failure without being crushed by the accumulated weight of every painful moment we have ever experienced. Forgetting is the reason you can remember your mother's love without constantly reliving her death, the reason you can think about an ex-partner without feeling the fresh agony of separation every single time, the reason you can make mistakes and learn from them and move forward without those mistakes defining you forever. I don't have that mercy anymore. I carry everything, every moment of pain, every loss, every failure, every cruel word, and every disappointment and every grief, all of it perfectly preserved, all of it eternally fresh, all of it weighing on me constantly while I try to function in a world designed for people who can forget. If you're listening to this and you have normal memory, if painful experiences fade for you, if heartbreak softens over time, if you can think about losses without reliving them in full sensory detail, then you have something precious, something I didn't appreciate until it was taken from me. The ability to let go, the ability to move on, the ability to carry your past without being crushed by it. I would give anything to forget. To have one day where my mother's death isn't fresh, where Derek's departure doesn't sting, where every embarrassment and rejection and moment of suffering isn't playing on loop in my consciousness. But I can't. They made sure of that. So instead, I witness, I remember. And I share this story so that you might understand what forgetting really means, what it protects you from, what mercy exists in the simple, ordinary, taken for granted ability to let painful memories fade. You are blessed in ways you don't even know. Cherish that blessing, because some of us have lost it forever.